Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an interview with Sunita Narayan. Sunita Narayan, let's now talk about the corrective measures necessary to prevent an urban nightmare as a result of the explosion of cars. To begin with, do you think the time has come to scrap the subsidization of diesel, the most polluting fuel of all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because what you're allowing is cheap and dirty motorization. I mean, and the government is losing on every liter of diesel that we use in our private cars.
If politicians won't bite the bullet and scrap the subsidization of diesel, would it be a suitable alternative to sizably increase the excise tax on diesel cars?
Oh, I think that's exactly what we are saying. We understand there's a loophole. We understand that politicians are helpless because diesel is kept cheap for agriculture. We know that cars are making use of that loophole. So we are simply telling government, increase the excise duty. But I will bet you, Karan, that's something the government doesn't have the guts to do because industry will never let it.
Well, we have a budget coming up in February. Let's wait and see. Would you say a second important step is to charge realistic fees for parking? For instance, in Washington, parking for a day costs $15. It's $30 in New York. It's 10 rupees in Delhi.
You know, Karan, it's always amazing for me that we are allowing cars to come in without any of these regulations. I mean, just think, you and I, we go hunting for office space. We need a desk. We know how expensive it is to get that desk space. And yet, the car uses 23 square meters of space. 23 square meters of space. Just to give you a comparison, a jhuggi, a slum dweller's house takes 15 square meters of space. So just tell me, why is it that we are not charging for that parking at the rates of real estate?
Your organization, CSC, a few years ago suggested that parking fees in Delhi should be increased to at least 120 rupees a day. Is that something you stand by?
Well, we basically calculated the cost of providing that parking. And if you look at these multi-level parking lots that are coming up as an alternative, you essentially find to recover the cost you need to pay 30 rupees an hour. So we tried to give a slight sort of subsidy to urban dwellers and say 120 a day, but we know how difficult it is to get something like that.
Do you think Delhi and perhaps Bombay need to go one step further? Do they need to emulate London and Singapore and charge congestion charges for motorists who insist on driving into the most congested part of town?
Well, I think if you were to increase your parking rates, you would essentially have a high congestion tax. But if I can take us to another issue, which I think is equally important, and that's really what I call the mental barrier to change, because these are all, regulatory issues, but you can only have regulation if you believe that you can do things differently. When we brought in CNG into Delhi, everybody accused us saying, you cannot have CNG because nowhere in the world has it happened. We said this is a leapfrog technology. Now, the leapfrog that I am presenting is, you have cities in India where essentially large numbers of people drive by bus, not by car. Please understand this. 60% of this richest city of India actually drives by bus. The car moves less than 10% of the people, occupies almost 70% of the road space. Now the question is, can you reinvent that by essentially saying, I will not go through the car route, I will jump straight through the most affordable, most convenient public transport system?
Absolutely. What you're suggesting, therefore, is a twofold strategy. On the one hand, you're saying, discourage the use of cars and thus take them off the roads without banning them, and instead encourage people by giving them incentives to use public transport. The problem is that you can only do the two together. You can't do them one after another. And at the moment today, public transport in India is neither reliable nor is it extensive. For some, it's not affordable, and certainly it's not efficient. How does the government give us the sort of public transport we need so that we would be incentivized to take a bus or the metro rather than want a car?
If I can just be very blunt about this, by stop talking about it and by doing something on it. Let's be very clear. We are talking about a transition. We are not talking about adding a few buses onto Delhi's roads. We are talking about a transition of a scale that has never been done in the world. The government can do one thing very simply.
You say act, don't talk. But what is the action needed beyond the simple answer of throwing more money at the problem? What are the specific steps?